So today we're going to take a look at a culmination of a couple months work from me that basically detailed and tallied the results from not all of the VCT games, but a very large sample size of the VCT games taken from the 12th of May to the 27th of June. That's basically from when Fade got introduced into Pro Play, and it's going to give us, a pretty good statistical analysis of what's going on in terms of the meta. Now, if you want to take a look at the just raw data spreadsheet that I used myself, I will leave a link in the description, probably not today, but the day after the video goes out. I'll probably leave a link in the description or in a pinned comment somewhere. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But first, let's talk about understanding the data. So I have color-coded things for you to make it nice and helpful for you to understand quickly at a glance. And basically what's going to happen is you can see we got win rates here. So we're talking, less than 40 would be very bad, 40 to 45 needs help, 40 to 50 would be okay, 50 to 55 is good, 55 to 60 is meta, and 60 plus would be an auto pick on that map, or at least should be an auto pick on that map. So that's how you understand the win rates, and it's the same for round win rates. The only difference with round win rates is that they, instead of increments of 5%, are in increments of 2.5%. The reason for that is it's very unlikely you're going to win games 13-2. You're much more likely to win them 13-10 or something like that. So the round win rates overall are going to be, just a bit closer together. So that's why they're separated by 2.5%. And the kind of relationship between these, what I would say is if one is like purple but the other is orange, that probably means that something's a bit off. Hopefully, most of them will be like within one tier of the other one. If it's a big gap, it probably, look at the round win rates, it's kind of a check for the win rate overall, right? Like if you've won bang on 50% of your rounds, but you've won 70% of your games, that probably isn't sustainable, and it probably means that, you're winning very close but losing quite heavily. And if we balance that out over time, you'd be more likely to trend to where your round win rates are. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at each map. We're going to take a look at the top comps on each map, the most played team comps on each map, and then we're going to take a look at the agents on each map as well before diving into the overall results of all of the data for each agent. So let's start with Ascent. And so the top three little tables here are the most played team comps on this map. So these are the top three most played team comps, and then there's one at the bottom. I've just included like a comp that I think is maybe interesting, maybe a team should play more, maybe they shouldn't play it more, maybe something that you could try potentially as well if you wanted to. So top three comps, I mean, it's Ascent, it's still pretty standard, as you can see, Sova KOs, Jets, Omen, one Astra in there, one Chamber for a Killjoy, pretty standard stuff on the whole. You take a look at the overall pick rates of them, they aren't super high. I mean, this one's fairly high, but other than that, there isn't too many comps that like a lot of teams are playing, so that's quite good that Ascent is now a bit more varied in terms of you don't get too many mirror matches. When we look at the win rate, I mean, this Astra one is doing a bit better than the Omen comp there overall, and this Chamber comp is doing a bit better than the Killjoy comp as well. So instead of playing like this super standard comp, maybe you just want to change one or two things like this Astra or Chamber. And then the comp that I have at the bottom here is just this kind of interesting Astra Raze Fade KO Chamber comp here, where you start to see some of the synergies between like the Astra and the Raze and the Fade whatnot, and those three agents have some nice synergies, and you can see small sample size, no doubt, but it is doing pretty well, and I wouldn't be surprised maybe if a couple more teams lent in towards this kind of comp. When we take a look at the actual agent stats themselves, so what we have here is the agents, obviously, the pick rate percentage. This means non-mirror win rate percentage. So a non-mirror game is one where one agent was picked by one team but was not picked by the other team, and the reason I'm including that over just normal win rates is because normal win rates just tend towards 50%, because obviously if you have an agent on each side, one's going to win, one's going to lose, so that's just going to be 50%. So we're not including any games where there are mirrors there, we're only including games where there are non-mirror games, and this means non-mirror round win rate. So we've got the win rate there, round win rate there for non-mirror games, and basically you can just at a glance hopefully tell is an agent good or not. So right, if we're looking at Astra v Omen on Ascent, more teams are picking Omen than Astra, but Astra maybe is a slightly better pick than Omen. It's not like super favored, but it's like close, either is fine, but maybe slightly favoring Astra at the moment on Ascent. Same for Chamber and Killjoy, similar sort of pick rates overall, and again, maybe slightly favoring Killjoy, but again, I mean, this round win rate is actually 0.01% difference, so very, very close. Either seems like a decent option. Sage is kind of, you know, a bit of a niche pick here, as you can see, and isn't doing too great overall. When it comes to Jet versus Raze, when we take a look at the pick rates, obviously Jet is favored and in the win rate data as well, but actually the round win rates are actually in favor of Raze overall. So maybe with enough time, if we kept playing this out, you know, we would see kind of, again, a bit of a 50-50, no clear real choice between the two. Sova and KO obviously picked heavily on this map, as you might expect. Sova's doing fine. KO also is doing fine. You know, nothing too special between these two. Breach, a bit of a niche pick, but it seems okay. And Fade is perhaps the pick that really, this is kind of the one thing I would take away from Ascent, is that, you know, Fade should probably be picked more overall, even though she does have a healthy pick rate. I think with time, you know, we probably will see more Fade, obviously being the new agent, but she is the one that perhaps is performing best. Moving on to Bind, again, not too much difference overall. You can see 4 of the same agents here are all played in the top 3 comps, and really there's only one difference, one with Viper, one with Breach, one with Fade. And you see the pick rates, again, not super high. Seems like there is some variance on Bind as well overall, which is good to see. But actually, this is kind of a bit of a surprise, because normally the top comps that are played on a map, you know, people get used to them, they know how to play against them, so normally their win rates aren't super high, they're kind of around 50%. But actually for Bind, the most played comp is actually one of, if not the most successful comp overall that's, you know, has a decent sample size. Really high win rate overall, and the round win rate as well. It kind of backs up the data that this isn't a fluke. No, this is really high for a round win rate overall. Above 55% is really amazing. So this comp, just play it, basically. You know, even though it is the most played comp, it's just really good. And so probably teams should just stick to what's kind of basic and what they know and just play this very strong comp here. When you change it for a Breach, things go very badly indeed. You see the win rate plummets, the round win rate plummets as well. So Breach, definitely go for Viper over Breach if you want to. But if you wanted to go for Fade, again, this is a really good comp as well. And so Bind is kind of the map where, you know, what people kind of think is good tends to be good, aside from maybe Breach. But then the comp that I wanted to show you, of course, was the Paper Rex comp with the Yoru, with a good comp with Breach, where you can see they've won 5 out of 5 games. I don't think this is all Paper Rex. I think there was some other teams that ran this comp as well. Only 5 games, so, you know, a tiny sample size. But the round win rate is absurdly high, and, you know, it's a Yoru comp, so I had to put it in there. One thing I did forget to mention in Ascent is that for these non-mirror games, we're only including agents with 15 or more games. I should have mentioned that before, but there you go. So you have to have at least 15 games to be included in the non-mirror data, basically, so that you have enough games to even make any sort of sense of. Speaking of which, let's talk about controllers on Bind, because this is one of the most, like, solid results. In fact, this is probably the most solid result of any map, and that is pick Brim on Bind. For the love of God, please pick Brim on Bind, because you can see when teams do not pick Brim and they go for Astro or Omen instead, my word, do they get punished, because Brim has this dark purple win rate. He's doing absurdly well. The round win rate is really good as well. And you can see the Astro and Omen, it is not good at all. Please pick Brim. He is the best controller on this map. The stats are screaming at you to please pick Brim. When it comes to Viper, though, as well, she has a healthy pick rate. But again, please pick Viper. Don't overthink this. Pick Brim and Viper. You know the old method that everyone used to run? Stick with it, right? Just stick with it. Brim, Viper, very good on this map. Pick them. As you again can see, the win rate's very high, round win rate very high as well. Chamber has a very high pick rate, but actually is just kind of an okay pick, actually below 50% in terms of his win rate and round win rate there as well. So like an okay pick, but nothing special. Sage not doing as well, but again, you know, this round win rate is quite a bit higher than what we would expect for the win rate overall. So maybe not as bad as it looks, but still not a great pick. Neon, I mean, I'm sure if you watched the Optic game from yesterday, you'll realize that, yeah, again, don't overthink it. Pick Raze. Pick Raze over Neon. It does, you know, just stick to what you know on Bind. It's quite good. For the love of God, don't pick Sova. Again, Breach, don't pick Breach. Again, don't overthink it. Sky and Fade are good, right? So basically, on Bind, all the agents that you kind of know are good are good. That's basically how it works. Pick Brim, pick Viper, pick Sky, pick Fade, pick Raze, and you will be fine. Now let's come to Breeze, and Breeze is perhaps the map with the least amount of change. You know, I've been talking about how on those other maps there, the pick rates of the top 3 comps weren't that high, but on Breeze, they really, really are, right? I think this might be the only map, maybe Icebox as well, where the pick rates of the top 3 comps are above 50%. You know, this is really, really high. It's by far the highest overall in terms of the pick rates for the top 3 comps. And there isn't that much difference between them either, right? KO for Sky, a Cypher for Chamber, not much changing at all. The win rates do favor the Sky comp of all of these. You know, this kind of comp with Sky instead is doing a lot better than perhaps the KO comp. And so maybe that if you did just want to play a standard comp, go for something like this. The comp I wanted to show isn't doing super well. I just thought it was interesting to show the no duelist triple initiator comp that DRX did start to run on Breeze, but then pivoted away from themselves, and you can see that they seem to have a good idea that, yeah, this comp wasn't super good, like kind of a slightly below average comp overall. Probably not one to run either. When it comes to the agents as well, you can see that there isn't too many agents to actually talk about, with, you know, not many agents actually seeing much play on Breeze at all. Viper here, you know, has an insanely high pick rate, as you would expect, and I haven't included a color code there because it's only 2 games. She actually did lose those 2 games, funnily enough. Chamber as well is doing pretty well overall, obviously super high pick rate, and is doing pretty well, it must be said. Cypher, you know, not super picked and isn't doing super well, although again, this might suggest that this is a little lower than it should be, and, you know, Cypher is actually, like, he's okay on this map, but nothing too special. Jet, this is actually one of Jet's best maps, right? She's commonly picked, but she's actually a pretty good pick on this map overall, and outperforming Neon as well on the whole. So Jet seems like you know, the pretty standard option for Breeze that's doing pretty well. KO does see a lot of pick rate, but as you can see here, is basically losing to Sky in this Sky versus KO debate. It does seem like Sky is just winning out overall. He's not a terrible pick, but and again, this perhaps suggests that this number is a little low, as Sky's does suggest that this is maybe a little high. But still, Sky is outperforming him overall. And Sova, again, has won 7 out of the 7 games that he hasn't seen play in, so that is something. But yeah, most teams are going to pick Sova anyway. Coming to Fracture, this is actually the map with the lowest sample size of all, but you can see the optic comp that they used very successfully at Reykjavik is doing very well, and is the most played comp, but is a good comp as well. You know, solid comp overall, doing pretty good. Same for this Sage comp that you've probably seen some teams run as well. It's a decent comp, nothing too bad with that. This comp where you kind of combine the two, where you run the Neon but the Sage instead of the KO, isn't doing as well. I mean, the round win rate is still fine, so you could definitely still pick up this comp and do okay with it. It seems like, you know, most of these comps based around this kind of idea are decent comps, nothing like crazy, but pretty good. And then this is the comp that I wanted to show because, again, this is a Paper Rex comp, but it is super fun because it's solo Viper controller running both Raze and Neon, and then Chamber Breach. Super aggressive comp, super interesting comp to run solo Viper, something that I'm not sure many people have done, but yeah, super interesting, and I'd be interested to see how Paper Rex, I hope that they bring this comp out at Copenhagen, because this would be quite interesting to see. And now let's come to the agents on Fracture, and as you can see, Astra isn't doing too well at all. Brim has a very high pick rate and is doing okay. A lot of these losses actually come to solo Viper controller on Fracture, who you can see is doing very well, whether it's as a solo controller or as the secondary controller. Viper is doing extremely well and probably should have a higher pick rate overall. Chamber has an absurdly high pick rate, so high that he actually doesn't get a color because it doesn't meet the 15 game threshold. Cypher, on the other hand, is doing very, very badly overall, and probably is not a great pick on Fracture, and it does seem like it is a Chamber map. Sage is an okay pick, actually. If we look at the round win rate, the actual win rate itself looks pretty bad, but the round win rate kind of tells us that, you know, if we play this out a bit longer, this is probably closer to 50 than it looks right now. Neon versus Raze, you know, might surprise some, but it seems like this is a Neon map, right? It seems like Neon is just outperforming Raze most of the time. You should be going for Neon overall. KO, this is one of KO's strongest maps overall as well. He's doing really, really well in terms of the win rate, and is very, very strong. And Breach, obviously, again, is almost an auto pick, but actually in the couple games where he hasn't been picked, he hasn't done that well. Moving on to Haven, and when it comes to the comps played on Haven, there is a lot of variety. Again, you can see that none of these numbers are super high here. Haven, one of the most played maps overall as well, but you can see that this kind of normal comp is doing pretty fine overall. The round win above 50%, so that seems like a fine comp. This secondary comp here with the Chamber and the Sky instead of the Sova, you know, not doing as well. And then this third comp here, which is quite an interesting comp as well. This this is kind of an interesting one to compare, because the only difference between this comp and the one that I kind of wanted to highlight is the difference between Omen and Astra. But if you look at the win rates, this win rate not high, this win rate very good. This round win rate not too great. This round win rate very, very good. And I've mentioned this before about Astra versus Omen on this map, but it is very, very true that Astra is outperforming Omen in all areas. And this comp in particular, you know, with the raise, the fade, the breach, the chamber, I mean, again, you can start to see some of the combos that you can pull with this kind of comp, is doing very well with Astra and not so well with Omen, despite having the same pick rate. And when we look at the agents overall, we do straight away start to see that Astra Omen diff. You can see that Omen is the more popular choice overall, but is not doing well at all. And this definitely is an Astra map, both in terms of the round win rates and the actual win rates themselves. It definitely seems like Astra is just the choice that pretty much every team should be going for. These numbers should probably be flipped overall. She's just doing extremely well. Chamber as well. This is like Chamber's best map. I know, again, that might surprise some people, but Chamber is doing really well on this map, win rate wise as well. His nominal win rate, round win rate is okay as well. Killjoy, because obviously Chamber is doing so well, is not doing as well. I mean, we might expect that, again, it would come a bit closer to 50% with these kind of round win rate numbers if we kept playing it out. But Chamber definitely over Killjoy seems like the choice on Haven. When it comes to the duelist pick, we actually have a choice between Jet, Neon, and Raze. And it does seem like Raze actually is the superior choice. Jet is struggling quite a bit. Neon is a decent pick. You can find success with Neon if you want, but Raze is really where it's at. Raze seems to be the best pick on this map overall, and you know, gives you more than perhaps Neon and Jet do, although Neon is still a fine pick. Sova is destroying on this map, as you can kind of see, because this is an absurdly high number overall. His round win rate is also pretty good. So yeah, Sova seems like, I mean, this is almost a surprisingly low number for Sova on Haven. I expected it to be higher, and with this win rate, I, you know, expect that it hopefully will get higher, because it seems like he's very good. KO is okay. Breach, I mean, I've talked about this one as well, right? Super high pick rate for Breach overall, over 80%, but doing pretty bad on the stats. Really not quite at the level you would expect for something to be such a high pick rate. Really not doing too well at all. Sky, again, the stats don't really love Sky on this map either, as you can see. Not great here either. And Fade is also a good pick on this map. And again, maybe you want to pick more Fade. Maybe even we might see Sova plus Fade somehow. I don't know what you'd do for flashes, but, you know, maybe that's a way that a team should explore with. Coming on to Icebox, and again, you know, not too much difference with Icebox. The pick rates of the top comps aren't super high, but you could tell that we have 4 of the same agents for all of them and just 1 different agent each time. And well, the most common comp is with the Jet here in this place, and this is not the way to go, my friends. Do not do this. Do not pick Jet, because there are just much better options. Going to our second option, we have KO, who's doing better, but still not great, still below 50%. Or you could play the G2 comp with Killjoy instead, and, you know, enjoy the fact that you're going to be winning probably a lot more games playing this comp instead of these two. But then the comp I wanted to show was just, again, slightly different. Not a massive sample size this time at all, but actually just put a Raze in there instead, right? Play the same 4 agents, but just put Raze in there. 9 teams have tried it, and 7 have been successful with a very good round win rate as well. Obviously, this is a low sample size, but again, probably something worth trying. And now let's look at the agents on Icebox, and we'll start with Omen, who obviously is kind of a bit of a niche pick and isn't doing too great either. Viper, obviously, almost always picked. Chamber as well, very popular pick, of course, and is doing okay. Killjoy, I mentioned this before, is doing pretty well, although the round win rate perhaps isn't super high, so maybe not as well as I once thought. Sage, again, seems okay, but it does seem like you don't have to pick Sage, right? Like, these numbers tell us that, you know, you don't have to pick Sage like some people might think. It seems like that is a viable option either way. Jet is really the big struggler, right? Healthy pick rate, but not very good in terms of the actual win rates here for Jet, not doing too well at all. And if you're gonna pick a duelist, again, you might as well pick Raze, because Raze is doing really well, like extremely well, like worryingly well. And so it seems like Raze should be the pick instead of Jet. It's not a massive sample size for Raze, but, you know, in those few games that people have picked Raze, she's doing very well. I mean, even Reyna seems like a better pick than Jet on this map as well. Again, small sample size, but, you know, in the early showings, even Reyna seems like a better pick than Jet. Obviously, Sova picked a lot, but actually not doing that great either. Sova is losing to Fade a lot when a team goes for Fade over Sova, so maybe that's a direction team should go in as well. You know, maybe there should be more Fade Raze comps on this map. I know there has been a couple. I know that Team Liquid were going for that and finding some success with it. So maybe more teams should follow in that footsteps and kind of go for that. And then KO is doing fine. You know, he's a fine pick. And then finally, Split is our last map, and obviously the map that is rotating out. This won't matter for ranked, but for pro play, let's take a look at it anyway. And well, Split is always the map that no one can really agree on. You can see no comp has more than 10% pick rate here, which is really quite, well, not that surprising, really, because it's Split, and no one has ever agreed on Split overall. So these are all really quite low sample sizes on the whole, and you've got the mech comp here in the middle that's doing, like, okay. You've got this Astra Viper Sky comp with the Sage that's doing pretty well overall, and the comp I wanted to show was just this Astra Viper. It's crazy, right, how you can just, like, change this chamber for a Sage, and the win rate go from, like, this to this, like, and how different even the round win rates are, right? Super, super crazy how just one change can seemingly make such a difference stats wise, but it seems that that is the case. When we take a look at the actual agents themselves in terms of Astra v Omen, it's actually pretty close, right? Again, it's very close between the two. The stats make slightly prefer Omen, but not by much, so you can find success with either if you want. This is actually Viper's weakest map overall. As you can see, she's kind of been dominating on the other maps where she is kind of a maybe pick, and unfortunately this is kind of the one map where Viper is struggling. Chamber as well, I mean, I've talked about this before, but Chamber is just not good on Split, right? He does have a bad map, and it is Split. It is rotating out, but for pro play at least, you know, Chamber is just not it, and Cypher instead is doing very, very well. So, you know, Cypher over Chamber is almost a definite at this point, you know, looking at these numbers. So he should be picked more. Sage also doing very well. Again, I'm sure many people would expect that Sage seems like a pretty good pick on Split. Weirdly, Jett has a very high win rate, but the round win rate is actually just okay, towards 50%, but somehow she has a very high overall win rate. And actually, again, this is another map where Neon is doing particularly well, but this Raze stat here, I'm sure some of you be like, what? How is Raze not doing well? Well, actually, when you look at the round win rate, it's not as bad. And this, again, is probably just one of those outliers where, you know, if we played this out enough times, you know, I'm sure that Raze would probably get back to 50%. Maybe it's just a surprise thing that, you know, a lot of teams are picking Raze, and so when someone doesn't pick Raze, they get a bit caught off by it. And then in terms of the initiators, you can see that Breach is doing well. This is actually a good Breach map. I know they do exist, and this is it. Unfortunately, it's rotating out. And KO is like okay, nothing too special. Sky is like okay, nothing special, and Fade again is like, yeah, decent, nothing special. That's kind of how it goes for the initiators. And so then let's take a look at the overall data for each of the different classes. We'll start with the controllers, and as you can see here, Omen, despite being, you know, kind of the main pick of the Dome Smokers, is actually not doing too well. Now, he's losing a lot to Brim on Bind. He's losing a lot to Astra on Haven. So it seems more that, like, you know, teams perhaps are just most comfortable with Omen, but actually, you know, that is being punished somewhat. In terms of Astra versus Brim, that's where Astra's struggles come from. You know, she's dominating Omen on Haven, and that's where, like, these numbers are coming from, but she's being destroyed by Brim on Bind and somewhat on Fracture as well. So that's why Brim looks so good, because it seems like people understand what the good Brim maps are, and on those Brim maps, Brim is good, and Brim is the choice. And then Viper, as I've mentioned, is just destroying, right? By far the highest non-mirror win rate of all of the different agents, just destroying basically on maps like Bind and Fracture, you know, where she's kind of a maybe pick. Seems like she should be more of a definite pick rather than a maybe pick on those maps, because yeah, she's just doing absurdly well overall. Coming to the Sentinels, and obviously Chamber's pick rate here at 68.81%, of course extremely high, but the win rates, you know, and the non-mirror round win rates as well are very normal, you know, very close to 50%. I've spoken about this before. Chambers kind of in his own weird space where he's kind of meta warping, so you have to prepare for him, but there are counters to him, right? It's not like he's just completely destroying in every single game. You know, he has a slightly above average, slightly above 50% win rate. Cypher obviously not picked too much, and with the removal of Split, that'll be even less, and as you can see, he is struggling. With the removal of Split, I'd be shocked if he doesn't get a buff sometime soon. Killjoy is doing okay, right? Her pick rate isn't super high, but with maybe a Chamber nerf, you know, she can come back strong, and overall win rate wise, she's doing okay. You know, this is very close to 50%. And Sage, much the same as well. Obviously, Sage kind of her own niche in a way, and is also doing absolutely fine. When it comes to the duelists overall, you can see here that Jett still the most picked, but actually teams seem to be getting punished for picking Jett more than the others. As you can see, Neon is doing very, very well indeed, as is Raze as well. Very high overall non-mirror win rate and round win rate pretty good for Raze as well. Obviously, Phoenix doesn't even make the cutoff of the 15 games overall. Only 3 games. And Reyna and Yoru here, you know, also doing okay. You know, maybe there is a space for Reyna and Yoru on certain maps as a niche pick. And then finally, the initiators. You can see Sova still the most picked initiator overall, and is doing pretty well overall as well, particularly on certain maps like Haven and Breeze, as I mentioned. KO is like a fine pick. He's the one that kind of sees like a lot of play on a lot of different maps, and is kind of just like average on all of them. He just kind of okay on all of them, aside from Fracture, where he's pretty good. Breach, that obviously is the kind of the big loser. You know, obviously this is really low overall. I had to go and double check that I, you know, got this right, and I did. Yeah, Breach probably is overrated, to be honest. He probably is an overrated agent where teams think that they get more out of Breach than they truly do, and really this pick rate should be a bit lower. And then Skye and Fade, well, Skye is just kind of average and pretty good, and Fade is really quite good, right? Really kind of edging towards being this dark green color rather than just light green. So Fade is just a good agent overall, and in a pretty good spot. And so that is the meta. If you're wondering, that was the meta overall, and so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Maybe that will change, you know, what agents you pick on certain maps. But yeah, with that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.